Well, Jesse, you're here. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Yeah, I thought you were gonna ask me about Nick Saban, but I am.
Well, we'll get into it here. Let's just start it off since that's what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of Nick Saban talk and everything else. Rapid fire. What do you think of the news of the day? Nick Saban retiring after 17 years and 6 national championships at Alabama and a 7th title when you factor in what he did at LSU as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall the number one superlative that comes to mind is just shocking. And I say shocking just because there was no rumors about it. There wasn't any expectation about it. But then when you sit back and think about it, I guess I didn't expect him to go out this way, but I kind of figured it might be coming soon. And the reason I say that is because of the portal and the current NIL situation, because Nick Saban built his empire. He was the Roman Empire, right? In terms of college football. He had the recruits. He had them consistently coming in. He was churning out national championships, playoffs appearances, whatever it might be. And then they introduced the portal and the NIL, and it really put him back to square one, right? Because it leveled the playing field. It was no longer about Saban could just get every recruit, and once one guy graduated, it was just the next 5-star stepping in after him. Didn't have the depth anymore, right? And so if I'm Nick Saban and I've gotten to the peak of the mountain, and then they introduce this NIL and portal, and I got to go back to square one, I'm just going to say the hell with it and get out of here, right? Like, why start over again when you were already at the top of the mountain? It just doesn't make sense for Nick Saban anymore. And so, I mean, we saw it early on when he was getting frustrated in the interviews talking about what's his name down at Texas A&M that just got let go, Jimbo Fisher, right? And so it was already, you could tell it was already bothering him or it was already agitating him. And again, when you're at the top of the mountain and you got the recruits stacked up, you've built your dynasty, you've built your empire, and then slowly it starts cracking brick by brick with the NIL and the transfer portal. Why would you go back to square one? He already went up that mountain. He's 73 years old. I don't think he's no longer fit to go back up that mountain.
Yes. Sliced bread, DK. Sliced bread. Yes, that was one of the quotes of the millennia, I think, so far. But yeah, no. You're exactly right. Look, like with everything that Nick Saban has done, and I think there's an argument that this season getting to the playoffs, especially when you consider the miracle against Auburn, that this could be considered one of the best coaching jobs that Nick Saban has ever done. Just what he did this year, getting to the playoffs with Jalen Milroe as the quarterback after what they went through, coming into the season, trying to figure out who the quarterback was even going to be. And, again, like winning what they won with him as the quarterback, I think that there's a real case for this as his best coaching job. But, again, like to kind of go back through the resume, he won 7 games in year one, and then he proceeded to win at least 10 games in 16 consecutive years to close out his career, where he won 6 national championships. And as I've said a couple different times, Alabama, before Nick Saban, they went from 1972 through 2005 with a total of 16 double-digit win seasons. And then he did it 16 years in a row to close his, career at Alabama. So it's amazing. So again, I don't think it's a slam dunk that whoever takes over this job at Alabama, with very few exceptions, like if it happened to be a Kirby Smart or whatever, very few exceptions, I don't think that you can just assume that whoever gets this job is going to continue to win at the same kind
You're
of
not just going to pick up where it's left off at this point.
Yeah. I mean, like Bill Belichick couldn't even keep his own clip up, without Tom Brady as his quarterback.
It's crazy because, I obviously everyone is already talking about, potential candidates. Well, I'm going to be frankly honest with you. If I'm a candidate, what makes Alabama appealing in the current landscape of college football? It is already hard enough with the portal and the NIL. You have to go with where you are establishing roots at. It's not just you can go someplace and just take over and continue to win, right? Like, I would be more comfortable, for example, like someone like Marcus Freeman, somewhere where I've already got myself established in and I've been working and churning this thing out for a year or two, than just pick it up and go to Alabama, because Alabama isn't the Alabama anymore. You're not just going to get recruits because your name is Alabama, right? Like, that's part of the reason why Saban left. And so these coaches, I get it, it's Alabama, but I don't think it's going to be Alabama that Saban built up. It's not, you can't just go over there and take over like you used to. I would be more comfortable at a place in the current landscape, because of how much parity there is year to year in college football, with being somewhere where I've established my program for a few years.
No, exactly. And to again, we talked about this at the start of the show, but I know we've got new people kind of jumping in. There was the Pete Thamel, Pete, of course, one of the reporters from ESPN, who included Marcus Freeman on his list of potential projected targets. Dan Lanning, Kalen DeBoer, Dabo Sweeney, James Franklin, Mike Navarro, Marcus Freeman as well. Am I going to say never? No, I'm not going to say never, but I just don't think that job is that much more attractive than the situation that he has now. And when you look at the fact, again, as we said earlier, do you really want to be the guy following Nick Saban, especially where all the expectations are right now? There are high expectations at Notre Dame, and they haven't won a national championship since 1988. Nick Saban is leaving with 6 national championships and just a handful of years removed from his last win, and all the double-digit wins that we talked about. The bar is set considerably higher there. I wouldn't want to be the guy who's following Nick Saban in that job.
Nothing's ever going to be a win there.
Yeah. Other than winning a national championship right out of the gate. That is it.
But then the thing is,
as you said, like, NIL and the transfer portal have leveled the playing field so much that, again, we'll find out when Nick Saban holds his press conference or, does whatever and actually comes out and says, Michael Hahn, yes, Ray Perkins, you're exactly right. Like, we'll find out, what Nick Saban says about why he's leaving, but you have to think that between his age, how long he's done it, the success that he has had doing it, and what college football has become with all these things that are working against him now, I think with Saban gone, this is really going to level the playing field. Like I was saying before, if I'm Sark at Texas and I'm going into the SEC, I'm feeling really good about where I am now after just going to the playoffs and going into the SEC without Nick Saban. I'm feeling much better about my chances
every SEC
today
coach
than I was a couple
feel
days
some
ago.
bit of relief, Mizzou should feel good. Ole Miss should feel good. LSU should feel good. Some of those teams that have been right on the brink for, the last couple of years, but couldn't get over that Alabama hump. I mean, I feel like that's a sigh of relief for literally every coach in the SEC.
Yeah. Tommy Gunn says, not sure if Thamel is the guy I'd call clueless. I mean, he's not clueless. He's doing what everybody does when a job like this comes open. You start throwing some big names.
Yeah. I mean,
and Marcus Freeman makes sense because of what he has done so far. Marcus Freeman has shown him. Yeah. That's what specifically in recruiting, because he still has to prove himself as a head coach, but the recruiting aspect makes him a candidate for any high-profile job.
Well, I think another element of this
high-profile job
is, like, Nick Saban's no young spring chicken anymore. This man's 73 years old, right? And I was thinking about, I was like, well, my grandpa's 77 and Nick Saban's 73, right? Like, he's going to be getting close to the 80s here pretty soon, right? Like, if he stuck around a couple more years. And it's just, at some point, you got to give it up and go enjoy. Everyone's talking about that home he bought for X amount of money and it's an island or whatever. But, like, at some point, you got to be able to enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I think he found that this is the perfect time for him to call it quits, to find, to get out, essentially.
By the way, Tommy, not happy that we ended the mailbag and segued into rapid fire. He said, you did what, 3 questions? No, we did more than 3 questions. We did at least 3 times that many questions. But don't forget, even though it's rapid fire, we still take listener viewer questions in rapid fire, right, Jess? Like we still address them in rapid fire. So if you've got more questions to come, get them in there. Make it happen. We can include him. We haven't had a chance to talk about this yet. Fill in the blank. Adding Rod Hurd from Northwestern means blank for Notre Dame's 2024 secondary.
It means a massive upgrade in the Notre Dame secondary because I think it's going to, he predominantly plays in the nickel. I think Clark, the transfer from Arizona State, is ultimately going to be the guy in the nickel, and I think Hurd's going to be the safety playing next to Xavier Watts next season, most likely. And I think those duo together is just going to bolster an already good defense and elite secondary. So it's just like putting the cherry on top continuously, and to me, it's just hats off again. I can't say enough about Marcus Freeman, and that man's been a dog in this portal. He's gotten everything that he's needed, and he's been a man on a mission, and he's just been tearing it up.
Big time. And I think you're absolutely right. And they've got both depth and front end type guys. So there's, because like you said, you're bringing in Jordan Clark as well. Whether or not he ends up being the guy or whether it ends up being Jaden Mickey, I think that's a question. But, spring football is, when you think about it, it's really not that far away, maybe in the 7 weeks away, something like that. So I think it's really exciting because it was already a great defense and they were able to keep Xavier Watts. And now you bring in a guy like Hurd, who, like you said, we expect to see play back there at the back end and maybe even kind of see what he can do from a nickel standpoint as well in the spring anyway, just to see how he compares to both Mickey and Jordan Clark as well. So they've addressed some immediate needs, and Rod Hurd is going to be a big part of that, I think. So very exciting to see.
I like this Northwestern Notre Dame relationship. It's been very beneficial before. No, it's seriously, because these guys it's very similar. The academic rigor, you're getting an intelligent and, athletic, well-rounded player. I mean, they had Ben Skronik. He ended up going to the NFL. And then they had another secondary guy a couple years ago that also came over from Northwestern, who I can't think of at the moment. And now you add, this guy. So I continue to like this relationship with Northwestern.
Yes, I concur. Scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are you about the possibility of Al Golden going back to the NFL now that the NFL's regular season is over?
Yeah, so when I think about this one, 5 out of 10 is 50-50, so a toss-up. I have better feeling than just a toss-up, so I think it's going to be – I would put this around a 2 or a 3. I just don't know – yeah, Brandon Joseph, that's the guy. Thank you, T-Guns. I just don't know who his connections are in terms of guys potentially being interviewed for possible positions, right? Because whoever gets hired has to have connections to Al Golden or have some sort of relation to Al Golden of being, this is a guy I want to bring my defensive coordinator into. And while Notre Dame has had a good year as a defensive coordinator, they're still at the college level. And I still think there were a couple of defenses better than him this season, like Michigan, Georgia, those types of defense. I think, I just don't think that Al Golden's name is at the top of the list. And then again, you have to consider who his connections are potentially in these open or vacant positions going forward. So, I just feel like if that were the real intention, there'd be more rumblings about it at this point and about him in the NFL. The only thing I'm more so worried about was him jumping to within the college realms.
Yeah. Like, again, we talked about this a little bit in the mailbag. I think it was a Tommy Guns question, actually. And I think if he goes to the NFL, it's going to be a coordinator.
Yes.
Like if you're going to leave to take another college job, it's going to be to become a head coach. And there are 7 vacancies right now in the NFL. This was a down year for the Bengals where he had his last roots in the NFL, so like you don't see a whole lot of guys kind of falling off that Zach Taylor tree right now. I mean, Taylor has been, now granted, Joe Burrow was hurt and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not knocking Zach Taylor by any means. I felt like they competed really well with Jake Browning as the quarterback, and Jake Browning competed very well in terms of his girlfriend, the bodysuit and the whole thing, like things worked out really well for Jake Browning as it turned out. But my point is, I think it's going to be kind of wait and see just in terms of what happens, because there are so many openings right now, so many head coaching openings in the NFL. And he did just put together one of the best defenses in college football this year. So I would put it, like at a 6. I'm not super worried. I'm a little bit more worried than where you are right now. I think he'll be okay. But again, it's like, who ends up being in these jobs and what kind of potential connection they might have to Al Golden.
Well, and I
that's
think
going to be
another
the
thing
biggest question.
is, on paper, yes, Notre Dame has had a good defense, but their defense hasn't been put on the national spotlight, right? And so I think if you're Al Golden and Marcus Freeman, this is still the accumulation of building up. It just reminds me so much of what Michigan just did, right? Like piecing this together over a couple years, a few years. It feels like that's what, Marcus Freeman and Al Golden are doing. It's like, okay, now we got the defense ready. Now, the offense is taking a step in this direction. And so once Notre Dame's as a team performs on a national spotlight, aka like the playoffs next year, and Notre Dame's defense then performs well, I think then you get
That's
more
when
spotlight.
He's going to be in even bigger demand.
Right,
Yeah.
because you're going to be on the national
Him or anybody
stage.
on this staff.
Right,
Yeah.
you're going to be on the national stage. More people, more eyeballs are going to be on you, and if you perform well at that level, that's when you're going to start to get even more interest. I just don't know how much interest that they have peaked. Beating North Carolina State, beating Duke, beating Stanford. I just don't see that as a big enough spotlight yet on this program and coaching staff to have enough national attention.
Don't disagree. Andre, how will this coaching retirement change the landscape of college football? I presume he's talking about Nick Saban. Who will want to take the job after a living legend? I would not want to. I would not want to follow.
I think you're going to see a trend of a lot of younger coaches, because I think it's going to take a lot more work and coaches who are eager and hungry to work harder in the recruiting trail, honestly, because that's what it's going to come down to with this transfer portal is you're going to have to work even harder in the recruiting trail. So I think you're going to see a trend of some of these, pension guys getting, seeing their way out of college football potentially. And you're going to see a wave or trend of younger coaches. Cause again, you're introducing a new style and landscape into football. And so when these younger guys are coming in, that's all they know. Right. And so these older guys have experienced, the past, and now they're trying to adjust to the now or the current. And they're just going to say, the hell with it. I'm done with this. I don't want this. I'm in the back half of my career. I've already put in my time. And so I think, again, you're going to see a more common trend of younger coaches.
And I mean, you're kind of seeing that right now, just with like some of these guys who are having a lot of success in the, just look at Marcus Freeman as an example. I mean, Harbaugh is not that old. Harbaugh is probably a little bit older than Saban was. We were talking about that. Saban was like in the 55-year-old range when he took the job at Alabama. And you're seeing guys that age and younger having a lot of success right now in college football.
Someone just put in the chat, Logan Diggs officially committed to Ole Miss.
Interesting.
Makes sense because that Judkins kid just went to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy, though? That guy was the leading back in the SEC, the prominent back in that offense, and he's still going to Ohio State where they have Travion Henderson.
Well, that and, apparently he thought he was supposed to have some input on how the offense
I heard about
was
that.
run there.
He kind of went into the office and said, this is how I think the offense should be run.
Which is like, that is NFL level stuff, man. Like for a player to walk into the head coach and say, coach, I'm not really digging how you're running these plays. This is how I think it ought to be.
I don't know if you follow Lane Kiffin on Twitter at all, but he's a funny follow. And he quote tweeted Judkins' announcement and Judkins' mother basically responding to the commitment as well. And I'm always like, is this a troll job or is he genuinely happy? You
never know. You never know with Kiffin if it is a troll or
well, and everyone's I know it's about the money, but still, you're the lead back in the best conference in football. I don't like that's to me that's more important than money. But and it's like how much difference in money are we talking about? Like 1.5 compared to 1.2 million. Like I don't know. I just think there's more to be said about being the best running back in the best conference in football.
Yeah.
So that's just me, though.
Well, I mean, there's going to be an argument about what the best conference is now with teams like Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA jumping over to the Big Ten next year. Jesse, I don't know if you remember Kahanu Kia, but he was a freshman 2 years ago when Marcus Freeman was still defensive coordinator at Notre Dame. He has been on a Mormon mission, and he's going to be returning to Notre Dame now. And Marcus Freeman was asked about Kahanu Kia. It's been a few weeks back. I've been actually I've had this, and we've had like so much other big news keep coming up. We haven't had a chance to talk about it, but here's what Freeman had to say about the return of Kahanu Kia.
I'm excited. I mean, I loved my 1 year with Kahanu. He played linebacker for part of the year and then moved to Viper part of the year. But to get him back in this program, the energy, the production, the physicality that he plays with, I'm excited to see. He hasn't played football for a year and a half, 2 years. So we understand that. But that was an agreement that we had when he told us he was going to go on this mission. And so I bet you we get a more mature individual, and I'm excited to see what he does when he gets back.
So, Jess, what should our expectations be for a guy like Kahanu Kia, who's been away from football for 2 years, as he makes this return to the Notre Dame football program?
Yeah, I think that you should have kind of low expectations. I think you have to have grace and expect kind of a rebuild in terms of getting back into ultimate football shape, because I'm not going to sit up here and act like I know a lot about Mormon missions. But it's a serious commitment, and it's a serious lifestyle change. And the only thing that I worry about potentially is, what is his physical kind of condition? Did he lose weight? Is he not as bulked up anymore? Was he doing any sort of lifting, working out, running? You know what I mean? Like, because when you're on these Mormon missions, it's a lot. It's a big time commitment. You're devoting a lot of your time to.
It's not like you're staying in Marriott's,
correct.
When you're in
and
South
so it's
America
just like
doing this stuff.
What sort of stuff did he do beyond the Mormon mission? Did he still devote time to trying to get workout in? Was he still potentially looking
and how much workout can you get in? There's only so much you can do, I think.
And so then also, are you doing anything like, I don't think so, but are you doing anything film wise? Like, are you looking at anything X's and O's? And so there's going to be, again, a kind of a rebuild back or transition back into football. But I think the positive side that you can look at this is now a more mature man. You're getting a guy who's 2 years older. You're getting a guy who, if he stays his whole time at Notre Dame, he's going to be a fourth year potential senior that's 2 years older than everyone. So he's going to have the frame to be more, dominant and mature. And I think he can definitely provide depth at the outside linebacker / Viper position, specifically the Viper position, that is kind of not the hole in the defense. Just, I don't think anyone knows the direction of where that position is kind of headed going forward.
Yeah. This was a 3-star guy coming out of high school, so there was, sort of raw, a little bit of a project anyway. But I remember being in high school, it's like we had, like summer weights, but not near, and again, this was high school, not near the kind of like off-season conditioning that even high school kids have right now. And so when we came back to practice, at the beginning of practices in August, it was like, boom, it hit you like a brick wall, because you'd done some stuff, but you weren't even anywhere near what it was like for football condition. And I've got to imagine that's what it's going to be like for a guy like Kia, being away for 2 full years, from football. So I think it's going to take some time to kind of get reacclimated. You hope that he's been able to do some stuff. I think short-term expectations have got to be pretty low, and hopefully at the very least he can provide some depth and, maybe start, pushing for some time within the next year or two. So I think it's like Notre Dame has had a handful of these guys over the years, but not a whole lot. So I'll be really curious to see what he does turn into here as he kind of progresses through the program as he gets back in. So Mike Bray posted a picture of himself with Micah Shrewsbury together before last night's Notre Dame Georgia Tech game in Atlanta. Bray, of course, is an NBA assistant with the Atlanta Hawks, and Bray said, "Irish and ATL program is in such great hands with Coach Shrews." What do you think of this Mike Bray move that he made, Jess?
I think it's a classy move. There's no reason for Mike Bray to post something like that. And again, it's not like his relationship with Notre Dame was bitter or ended sour. But again, once you are done at a university, you don't owe that university anything anymore, right? Like, you move on, they move on, etc. I just think it's a really classy move. And it's also, to me, it's reassuring, right? Because he doesn't have to say those things. He doesn't have to put that out to the social media world. He doesn't have to put it out to anyone, but he deliberately made a choice to put a picture out there with his, successor and say the program is in great hands. And so coming from Mike Bray, and again, I know things didn't end well in terms of, basketball win-loss and, Mike Bray's time was kind of overdue at the end, but he's still a really good basketball coach. He's still a really good, teacher of the game. That's why he's got a job in the NBA still, right? That he's very well respected. He's a great guy. And so when he goes out and says something like that, it just reassures me about what Shrewsbury is doing with this program already.
No, exactly. And, like Bray didn't have to do this. He didn't have to, he could have just said, well, I'm busy and, I'm doing my NBA thing. I don't have time to go down and do that. But he even showed up wearing an Irish shirt, that's just Mike Bray, So again, he didn't have to do it, but it is really cool that he did do it. And then he put it out there, on social media. And it's good, because I know, like between Digger and Bray, there was both McLeod and Matt Doherty for his 1 year, so there were like a couple guys in between, but like Digger Phelps was always very supportive of Mike Bray, when Mike Bray was the head coach, so it's good to see that kind of connection that you've still, Mike Bray still being so relative, with it being recent, with him leaving the program, that he is this supportive and in there for Micah Shrewsbury and showing both Shrewsbury and the program that kind of support.
Yeah, to me, it just feels like it really weathers the storm for a lot of doubt that I think people might still have currently.
Right. For a lot of people, maybe you would have needed a little bit more time to pass, to do something like that. But Bray's in there right away. So fill in the blank. Shrewsbury's men beating Georgia Tech in overtime last night means blank.
They are continuing along the correct projection, right? Like I just think they're continuing, and it's just so refreshing to see how they have played ever since Shrewsbury called everyone out. And I know I keep coming back to this, but it's significant, and you're seeing the results of it. And so, it's very easy for a coach just to kind of go along with the motions, knowing that he is not in a good spot in his first year in terms of roster, having the right guys he wants, but he's not making excuses. He's putting his foot down and saying, hey, we need to play better. We're going to play better. And ever since then, they've been doing that. And so, they're back to me they're on that right projection of they're not going to look like crap. They're not going to beat everyone, but they're also not going to lose to everyone. And they're going to be, able to compete in the ACC. And I think that is the perfect amount to ask for if you're a Notre Dame fan in this first season.
Yeah. And that's, like I said at the time, I don't think that beating Virginia meant that they had turned a magical corner, but at the same time, when you were floundering the way they were floundering, and it's not necessarily a horrible thing that they were floundering just because of all the, the things that Shrewsbury was up against, putting the roster together and everything else that he had to do with the inexperience that this team had coming into the season. But when you were having those kind of issues, then he, called everybody out the way he did to be able to win that game against Virginia. I think, like, even if you still expect this season to be a bit of a roller coaster, like they're not going to go out and, win those kind of games night in and night out. But psychologically, that tells the guys in those uniforms that if you do things the way we want you to do things, we can get these kind of wins. And so for that to happen, it put in the back of their heads that they can do it. And they have looked like a different team since then. And last night wasn't perfect, but the fact that you can go on the road and beat a team of at least equal caliber on the road and pick up a conference win like that. And I loved seeing on social media, what happened afterwards. It's like, celebrate the wins. There are people who, have that attitude, act like you've been there before and all that kind of stuff. But I think that you also have to celebrate the wins when you get the opportunity, have fun with it. And I think that, I think it's great for the program. It shows that, I just saw what Joe said right here. And this is kind of what I was, shows that the coach has a team moving in the right direction and that lack of effort will not be accepted. And effort, as we've seen these last few games, will go a long way. Effort and attitude pointed in the right direction.
Yeah, and I think that game, in which he called everyone out, I think that was their bottom out point of the year. I think that's going to be the worst. That was their worst. That was the lowest of the low in their season. I don't think you're going to see anything worse than that the rest of the season, right? And I'm not saying that this is how it's going to end. There's still a whole season to go. But if you told me at this point right now the men would have more conference wins than the women, I'd tell you that you're crazy. And it's the case right now. And again, I know it's not going to end like that. But if you told someone on paper, beginning of the season, and we stopped on January 10th, and you said the men would have more conference wins than the women, no one would believe you. But they've grinded out some of these conference wins. And that's what they're going to continue to do, I think.
Yeah. For the women, it's just a matter of getting everybody healthy.
And getting everyone synced up. When people are when there's time off like that, and you introduce such a big, a star-studded player back into the lineup, everyone's got to adjust. You got to figure out what those rotations look like, what those minutes look like, how your game can complement their game, and their game can complement everyone else's game. It's just going to take a little bit to get refreshed and synced back up, I think.
Yeah, again, it's a couple months away from tournament time still, but with the men to be able to, do what they're doing right now, just
get hot right before the tournament.
If they can keep doing it, even if you're plucking away a little bit under 500 in the ACC going into the conference tournament, you've got to feel like, hey, we can win any game that we go out there. And that's the kind of stuff that Shrewsbury's teams did at Penn State, in his 2 years there at Penn State. And he said it before, the only goal is get better as the season goes on, and then you feel like you can do anything.
You got that opportunity at the end, right?
Yeah. And that's why they overachieved come tournament time when he was at Penn State.
And I think that's a big thing to look forward to. You want to be that team if you're Notre Dame, the team that's not at the top, but that team that's in the middle of the pack that everyone looks at and says, man, I really don't want to play that team because if we don't show up, they're going to give their heart. I mean, they're going to play with effort. They're going to play with hustle. And if we don't play our game, they can knock us off. That's the kind of team that they are going to be in this tournament. Is if you don't perform or if you have an off night, Notre Dame has the opportunity to beat you.
Well, and that's why I like that there's so much more focus and emphasis on the defensive side of the ball because, that Duke game as an example, they didn't beat Duke, but defense kept them in that game till the end. They didn't quite have the horses to pull it off.
Louisville, right?
Yeah, but you keep playing like that, and then you add a few guys over the next year or so, and it's all going to pay off in the long run. This is still a long game for Shrewsbury, and I think it's going to pay off in the long run. But I think it's good that we can find, that we're starting to see some tangible signs of that it's not all just going to be despair because they've got this young, inexperienced team. They're going to compete with some teams. And I think that's kind of fun to see as we get to see this play out in front of our eyes here. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Pete Carroll is out after 14 years as the Seattle Seahawks head coach.
It's shocking. And I think I saw something today and the entirety of the Seahawks franchise that made the playoffs 10 times. Pete Carroll made the playoffs 10 times as well. Everyone up to Pete Carroll made the playoffs 10 times. Pete Carroll himself made the playoffs 10 times. And again, this is another one of maybe comparable to Jim Harbaugh. You could say what you want about Pete Carroll here and there, wonky guy, but great coach, wins everywhere he goes, right? And to me, I think the real thing that we learned about Pete Carroll is when Russell Wilson left, he still took a Geno Smith-led team to the playoffs. He still competed and had, good teams with Geno Smith. And so to me, that shows it's not the players, it's the coach. The coach can win with just about anyone.
Oh, Joe, I know Vince would be right there with you. Joe says, sweet justice, still despise him from his criminal USC days. The other side of that, K-Mac says, tough to see him go. Press conference was rough. I haven't seen the press conference yet, but I thought I was shocked when the Pete Carroll news came out, and then Nick Saban said, "Hold my beer."
I was gonna say.
But I mean, this is just the fourth time in 14 years Pete Carroll has been in Seattle that they didn't make the playoffs. The most successful coach in the history of the franchise, won national championships in college, and won a Super Bowl. One of 3 coaches to win championships at both levels. Jimmy Johnson, Barry Switzer, Pete Carroll, the only 3 to win a college football national championship and win a Super Bowl.
You know what 2 of those
Pretty
guys
amazing.
got in common, right?
It's the team that we're not supposed to say. Is that like when we get people stirred up if we say the name? Jim Harbaugh, by the way, Bobby Ross, the only other coaches to win a college national championship and even get to a Super Bowl. So they're in pretty select company themselves. But I was shocked. I just found out today, by the way, don't know why I didn't know this before. Pete Carroll, 1977, was a graduate assistant for Lou Holtz at Arkansas.
Didn't know that.
I did not. Like I said, I just found that out today. Felt like that was kind of amazing. So now we had these questions in here earlier. Tyler Evans, thanks for the super chat. Who's ready for NFL playoffs and do we believe?
Thank you, Tyler. We have
year?
to answer this question because you paid us $5.
That's right. Cannot avoid it. My confidence level, if I'm going 1 to 10 in the Cowboys, is a 6, is where mine is at. How much higher is yours? Because you are obviously you're always far more optimistic than I am.
Them being the 2 seed definitely bumped me up to about, I would say my ceiling is an 8, but I would say I would land comfortably around a 7 right now. Here's what I'll say. I had
a feeling yours was going to be right around that.
I will feel very confident if the Rams and Buccaneers can win this weekend, because if that happens, Cowboys don't have to play the Lions. And that means that they would host Tampa Bay and the 49ers would get the Rams. So if you can play the Packers and Buccaneers in back-to-back rounds at home, I feel very confident about that. I start to get uneasy when we start talking about going to San Francisco again. That's where things get a little bit uneasy. But I
was
think,
still, I'm not going to write off the Packers by any means because there's a lot of history there. But like I was sweating a little bit. Like if they would have had to play the Rams in the first round, that was not a matchup I wanted to see. No.
Didn't want that at one because Sean McVay is ahead of Mike McCarthy in terms of coaching.
Yes.
And I think that's going to be, if they flounder in the playoffs, it's going to be because of penalties or clock management or overall just coaching issues. But the real thing I'm concerned about right now is Dan Quinn leaving for Seattle. So, but that's
that's
discussion.
Like going back to that Pete Carroll thing. I think that is a very real thing. Legion of Boom and all that. Like, I think that's very real. Stephen A. Smith, though, says that this Cowboys team has the best chance to reach the Super Bowl since 1995.
I agree with that.
Sell that.
I buy that. I think, I 100% buy that. I think Dak is playing his best football. CeeDee Lamb is playing his best football. Those two are the best wide receiver and quarterback tandem in the NFL right now. I think they have a defense that can get it done. And so you combine having a top 5 defense and a top 5 offense and your quarterback playing with the most confidence that he's ever had. I do think that this is their best shot. And this is overall a down year for the NFL, in my opinion. I don't think there's super huge juggernauts quite like any, and you don't have elite quarterbacks out there ready to take you down.
Thank you, Michael. This was about to roll off my tongue.
Damn you, Patrick Creighton.
2007 was supposed to be it. They had the number 1 overall seed, 13-3. And then here comes Eli and the Giants rolling into Texas Stadium. And Patrick Creighton, thanks for dropping that wide open pass. Patrick Creighton changed the whole.
But it was all Tony Romo. Don't get it twisted.
Right, it's always Romo's fault. That's right. That's exactly right. DK says if the Cowboys were a character on Seinfeld, why would they be Newman?
I think that they're Kramer, if anyone. Just so sporadic. You don't know what's coming. Week to week, you think you know what you're getting, and then here comes crazy Kramer coming through the door, and it's a completely different, off-topic crazy situation that they got going on.
I think so as well. Mike Huff, going back to Marcus Freeman in the recruiting, needs to get Keon Keeley, the decommit who ended up at Alabama. I think that's it's a big opportunity potentially. Get Keon back up here at Notre Dame. Let's see what happens. I don't know. All right. Well, in a day of all kinds of crazy you're killing me, Sloppy Joe, with the Quincy Carter. Oh my gosh. See, and this is why people don't appreciate Tony Romo enough, because if you watch the Cowboys in the Quincy Carter, Quincy Carter years, even the Drew Bledsoe, there were so many bad quarterbacks that came after Troy Aikman before Tony Romo. It's why you have to appreciate
Drew
Tony
Bledsoe
Romo more than Tony Romo gets appreciated. That's right. Poor Drew Bledsoe gave way to both Tom Brady and Tony Romo.
Tough career, right?
Oh, man, I tell you what. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Appreciate all the questions today. We'll be off tomorrow because I've got a Notre Dame women's basketball game, so I'll be doing that. They're hosting Boston College tomorrow, so no show for us tomorrow night, but we will be back Friday at 5 o'clock with the Rapid Fire show. So we will do that. And, I saw somebody say, hey, maybe we need to throw some mailbag in there. We'll make it. We'll make it / a mailbag on the Rapid Fire show on Friday. We can do that for you always. See you, Tommy. Everybody be careful out there if you're driving, whatever you happen to do. I know the weather's supposed to keep getting worse over the next day or two. So subscribe, rate, review, hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you Friday on IB Nation Sports Talk.